Hey Dragonfly Swarm, the king of unconventional DPS that just so happens to be shockingly high has returned with a rate-up banner among like a million other characters for 2.4. Xiao is a unique and extremely fun main DPS unit that many players consider to be one of the stronger DPS options in Genshin, with his high mobility, massive AoE anemo damage, and relatively easy to build kit. So today, I'm gonna drag you guys through this guide on how to build and play Xiao. Also, thank you to my friend Tongs for letting me borrow her Xiao for this. First things first, the bread and butter that everyone should know about Xiao's kit is that despite his normal attacks having pretty normal damage, Xiao's plunge attacks have much higher than average damage, and his entire kit revolves around rapidly jumping and plunging onto enemies to deal damage in massive anemo AoE circles. Now, plunge attacking as fast as Xiao does makes it really difficult to chase enemies down because rather than moving horizontally, you're pretty much exclusively moving vertically, like up and down during his burst. However, Xiao's elemental skill solves that problem quite well, and it also looks super cool when he uses his skill. Xiao's skill allows him to dash forward a considerable distance, dealing anemo damage to any enemy he crosses during the dash, and he has 2 charges of this ability at C0. This ability not only deals a formidable amount of damage, but it's spammable and it has a low cooldown, and you can use it mid-air, which is, in my opinion, pretty sick. It feels great. Personally, I think this ability is best used sparingly as a way to chase your enemies while you're in Xiao's burst, but I also see the appeal in spamming it like a madman because of the zoomies. Now on to the ability that makes Xiao who he is, his elemental burst, which basically just puts him on steroids for 15 seconds. Firstly, during this 15 seconds, Xiao's attacks are infused with anemo damage that cannot be overridden by other elements. He also gains a massive buff to the damage his plunge attacks deal, and his plunge attacks gain a much larger AoE than normal. And the biggest thing about his burst is it massively increases how high Xiao can jump, so unlike any other unit in the game currently, he can rapidly plunge attacks. The only caveat to this sick ability is that while in this state, Xiao will lose 2% of his current health per second, so he's a unit that pretty much always requires you to pair with a healer. Now onto his little extra stuff. Xiao's first ascension passive grants him 5% increased damage for every 3 seconds he's in his burst state, which snowballs into a large amount of extra damage overall, meaning you'll always want to make sure you can keep him on field for as long as possible with his burst. His later ascension passive increases the damage dealt by his elemental skill dash when used within 7 seconds of each charge, and this damage increase can stack up to 3 times. Now, there are a few important tips to keep in mind regarding Xiao's abilities. Firstly, given the low downtime and really long uptime on his burst, Xiao is a selfish DPS, meaning you're better off pairing him with units who can support him from off-field, because he'll be taking up the vast majority of the on-field time. Secondly, as I said earlier, it's best to use Xiao's dashes somewhat sparingly, especially when fighting multiple enemies that move around a lot, like those stupid dogs. But I guess when you're fighting one giant boss like the Rock Frog or Ice Fire Lady, you can kinda just spam the dash. Alrighty, let's talk money. Or more appropriately, constellations. Xiao's constellations are actually pretty weird, as in on paper, most of them look wildly underwhelming, but in practice, they're quite nice. At C1, Xiao gains 1 extra charge of his elemental skill dash, which not only gives him 1 extra charge. Wow, whoa, who would have thought? But it also allows him to fully utilize his second ascension passive, because the increasing dash damage stacks up to 3 times, not just 2. I'd say C1's pretty worth the Primogems if you're a dedicated Xiao main, and I wouldn't necessarily say you have to have it like Hu Tao's C1, but it does give him more zoomies, so do with that what you will. At C2, Xiao's energy recharge is increased by 25% while off the field, which seems really mediocre for a C2, but in practice, like I said, this should be enough to secure enough energy to make sure his burst is always up for rotation, giving him nearly 100% uptime on the field. This also means that you won't need to roll 25% energy recharge on an artifact and can instead roll it all into crit damage. Xiao's C4 is garbage. I'm not gonna lie with you, it's pretty bad nowadays. At C4, Xiao gains a 100% defense bonus when he's below 50% HP, which in the old Genshin days wouldn't be too bad, but nowadays that's not enough to keep him alive. With corrosion in the game, sheer cold, and sheer heat, the weird electro atmosphere stuff, plus his own health draining burst ability, relying on this constellation alone for survivability just is not gonna cut it. C6, however, is quite broken in contrast to C4, but it requires you to be rich, or very lucky. Basically what C6 does is it gives Xiao a free charge of his dash anytime he hits 2 enemies at the same time with his burst plunge. Additionally, for 1 second after getting a charge this way, the charge has no cooldown, so this constellation basically is spelling out the word zoomies. I'll say it one more time in this video. Xiao is zoomies. But all in all with his constellations, Xiao's already very strong at C0, and I'd only really recommend up to C2 at the absolute most if you really want to get cons. Moving on to Xiao's artifacts, it's actually the most straightforward build I've ever seen. Xiao pretty much exclusively uses 1 combination of artifacts, that combination being a 2-piece Viridescent Venerer, 2-piece Gladiators / Shimenawas. Given that he's an anemo anemo DPS, Xiao really doesn't have his own dedicated 4-piece artifact set yet, so his only real build is the 2-piece for its 15% anemo damage bonus and 18% attack bonus. This combination of stats will give Xiao his best damage output, and until he gets a dedicated 4-piece set, we are stuck with this. I hate 2-piece sets, and I don't even know why. In regards to his stats, you'll want to run an anemo damage cup, an attack sands, and a crit rate/crit damage circlet, depending on which stat you need more of. But Xiao scales with crit rates, so I'd recommend a crit damage circlet. On his artifact substats, crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, and a little bit of energy recharge are all welcome. Elemental mastery doesn't really matter much on Xiao at all though, given that his massive damage output doesn't come from swirl reactions, it just comes from raw anemo damage. The good thing about Xiao using the 2-piece however is that you have 3 whole artifact sets to choose good substats from. 3 because Shimenawas and Gladiators have the same 2-piece effect, so you can use whatever combination gives you the best stats. As for Xiao's best weapons, there's only a few options that he works with, but he works really well with them, so that's nice. Starting with his best in slot and the one that matches him the coolest, the Primordial Jade Wing Spear is a 5-star polearm designed for Xiao. It boasts a massive 674 base attack at level 90, as well as a nice 22.1% crit rate at level 90, bringing Xiao up to a 46% crit rate with 0 crit rate substats overall. This weapon has a really nice passive that increases your attack by 3.2% at R1 every time you hit an enemy, stacking up to 7 times. At maximum stacks, all the damage you deal is increased by 12%, so there's a lot of damage boosts there for Xiao. His second best in slot is the infamous Staff of Homa for its 608 base attack and 66.2% crit damage stat at level 90. The passive increases Xiao's HP by 20% and provides an attack bonus based on his maximum HP. The reason this weapon works so well on Xiao is because of its huge crit damage stat as well as its pretty high base attack, but he also makes good use of its passive, so now we just gotta pull one of these Staffs of Homa. As for Xiao's best 4-star weapons, the good news is that his best one is completely free to obtain, being the Blackcliff Pole. You can buy this weapon in the Star Glitter shop for 24 Masterless Star Glitter. It's an amazing free-to-play weapon for Xiao because of its modest 510 base attack and really nice 55.1% crit damage stat at level 90. Plus, with its passive, every time you defeat an enemy, you gain a 24% attack bonus at R5 for 30 seconds, which can stack up to 3 times. As you can imagine, that adds up quick. His other option is the Deathmatch Polearm, which is considerably less valuable on Xiao, but still a decent option if you can't currently get your hands on a Blackcliff pole. However, this weapon is locked behind the Battle Pass, but I've always vouched for the Battle Pass. It gives you so much loot. Deathmatch is decent for its 454 base attack and 36.6% crit rate stat at level 90, allowing Xiao to focus entirely on attack percent and crit damage substats with artifacts. Plus, the passive is actually really nice. If there are at least 2 opponents near you, you gain 16% attack and defense, but if there are less than 2 opponents near you, you instead gain a 24% attack bonus, and that's all at R1. So although it's not as efficient on Xiao as Blackcliff Pole, it still gets the job done. Now moving on to the weirdest part about Xiao, team building. Given his very unique role as a selfish anemo main DPS unit, Xiao has a few requirements for team building, the first of which being a healer. I mean, the guy's literally withering away while he's in his burst. He's gonna need healing. But healing is more important now than it has ever been because of all the new mechanics in the game that chip away at your health, even with shields and even when you're not on the field. So bringing a character such as Jean is great for Xiao because she's not only one of the strongest healers in the game, but she provides a good amount of particles for Xiao to regenerate his burst faster. If you don't have Jean though, there are a lot of other great options for healing, such as Bennett. And Bennett not only heals extremely fast, but he also buffs Xiao's attack, which the only issue being that his healing and buffing is restricted to a stationary zone. You can also get away with Barbara or Kokomi, both of which being strong healers that can heal Xiao through multiple means. There are other great options, but the general rule is to pick a healer that can heal Xiao without taking up too much on-field time, because as I've said, Xiao is selfish. The longer he's on the field, the stronger his demon shenanigans are. You're also gonna need an anemo battery for Xiao because of his burst's hefty 70 energy cost, which is why Jean makes such a great pair with him because of heals and battery. But you can also get away with using Sayu as a Jean substitute for her nice particle generation and great off-field healing plus buffing. Sucrose also works though, given her ridiculously high amount of particle generation, and then there's Kazuha and Venti, who not only generate lots of particles for Xiao, but they also crowd control enemies extremely well, making Xiao's plunges hit many more enemies at one time. In all honesty, you can't go wrong with whatever anemo character you decide to use as Xiao's battery. I would just say the strongest pairings for him right now are Venti or Jean. Now that you have a healer and an anemo battery, however, you'll need one last slot, and it could honestly be anything. Just like Ito's team builds are very abstract, Xiao's team builds, after you fill his must-have slots, become very flexible. Your last character could be a shielder such as Zhongli, because his shields will give you a bit more survivability as well as resistance shred, but keep in mind, not even Zhongli's shield can save you from corrosion, so you still need a healer if you run a shielder. But if you'd rather take a more aggressive approach to your Xiao team, you could instead fill his last slot with an off-field DPS DPS such as Albedo, Fischl, Raiden Shogun, etc. Basically just characters that have long-lasting DPS skills that they don't need to be on field to use. And that's basically all you're gonna need with a Xiao team. Although his needs are quite specific, there's so many characters nowadays that fill the roles of his needs so well that his team building has become much more fluid and manageable than it was when he was released. So long as you have a battery, a healer, and a secondary form of damage, your Xiao should be able to plunge a planet to death. That sounded like a plumber joke. So now that your Zoom Zoom Plumber Demons build is complete, I'm gonna go over a few important final notes about this dude that you should know. Number 1, at C1, of course he gets an extra charge of his dash, we knew that, but it also allows him to generate more energy particles for himself, meaning you'll need much less energy recharge focus on him, which pretty much makes C2 obsolete if you have a good anemo battery. Number 2, you don't actually have to be at the peak of Xiao's jump to plunge during his burst, so with a little practice, you can get surprisingly good at plunging just after he jumps to shorten the time between plunges and overall massively increase your DPS with him. Number 3, if you sprint dash just before jumping during Xiao's burst, you'll actually fly up a little bit in the direction you sprinted towards, which can help close distance between enemies while still consistently plunging. This is assuming you're not saving your Zoomy charges for gap closing. And honestly, that's all I got. That's the Xiao guide. You're now a certified Zoomy Plunger Demon, and that is a great honor, alright? So if you enjoyed this video or it helped you in any way, please like and subscribe because it helps with the algorithm thingy that everyone talks about. But also, you should totally follow me on Twitch and join my Discord server because I love to see you around in my community. Alright, I'm gonna go try my absolute hardest not to pull for Xiao because I'm saving for Yaimiko. I am saving for Yaimiko. But I don't know, man. I quite enjoyed being an anemo demon plumber. I don't know. We'll see.